What if the dirtiest, most ignored, most overlooked coin sitting at the bottom of your grandfather's old tobacco tin turned out to be worth more than your monthly rent? What if that blackened, corroded, barely recognizable little half penny that nobody has touched in 60 years is quietly sitting at the center of one of the most explosive value stories in the entire history of Australian coin collecting? Because right now, today, early Australian half pennies from the first 2 decades of the 20th century are doing something absolutely extraordinary in the collector market. And the people who are discovering these coins in old estates, in deceased family collections, in forgotten tins and boxes and envelopes tucked away in sheds and attics across this country, are walking away from appraisals with numbers that are genuinely changing their lives. These are not glamorous coins. These are dark, dirty, heavy little copper pieces that most people would not pick up off the ground. And that is exactly why the people who know what they are worth have a massive advantage over everyone else. Today, we are going to close that gap completely. Let's get started with coin number 1, the 1932 Australian halfpenny Commonwealth of Australia. There is a very specific kind of excitement that experienced Australian coin collectors feel when they encounter a 1932 halfpenny. And it is the kind of excitement that comes not from glamour or obvious prestige, but from deep knowledge, the knowledge that what looks like a dirty, unremarkable copper coin to the uninformed eye is in fact one of the most strategically important and financially significant dates in the entire Australian pre-decimal copper series. The 1932 Commonwealth of Australia halfpenny occupies a position in Australian numismatics that is genuinely unique. And understanding why requires understanding both the historical context of its production and the collector dynamics that have driven its value to levels that most people outside the specialist coin world find almost impossible to believe. The year 1932 sits at the absolute depths of the Great Depression in Australia. The country was in the grip of economic catastrophe. Unemployment had reached catastrophic levels. Wages had collapsed. Businesses were failing daily. And the social fabric of the nation was under a strain that older Australians of that era never forgot for the rest of their lives. The Royal Australian Mint, operating under the severe budget constraints imposed by the Depression-era government, produced coins in quantities that were tightly controlled by the economic realities of the moment. The 1932 halfpenny was not produced in the kind of generous quantities that peacetime prosperity would have allowed. The mint was conservative, careful, and financially constrained in every decision it made during this period, and that constraint is directly reflected in the survival numbers and collector market dynamics of coins from this year. Now let me tell you exactly what this coin looks like, because knowing what you are searching for is the first step toward finding it. The obverse of the 1932 Commonwealth of Australia halfpenny carries the left-facing portrait of King George V, the reigning British monarch at the time, surrounded by the legend George V, King Emperor. This portrait was the masterwork of Sir Bertram McKennell, the Australian-born sculptor whose work on Commonwealth coinage is considered among the finest royal portrait die work ever produced. The level of detail in this portrait is extraordinary for a coin of this denomination. The texture of the king's beard, the precise modeling of the facial features, the subtle definition of the jaw and neck, the careful rendering of the crown, all of it executed with a level of artistic ambition that goes far beyond what you would normally expect from a humble halfpenny. The sharpness with which these portrait details are preserved on any given specimen is one of the primary and most important determinants of its grade and therefore its financial value. The reverse of this coin carries the Commonwealth of Australia 1 halfpenny inscription arranged within a decorative wreath design that frames the denomination text with an elegance and formality appropriate to the official coinage of the Commonwealth. The wreath design surrounding the central inscription is detailed and carefully executed, with the individual leaf and botanical elements rendered with a precision that rewards close examination. The overall composition of the reverse is dignified and classically proportioned, reflecting the design sensibility of an era when even the smallest denomination coins were treated as official statements of national identity and Commonwealth membership. The date appears on the reverse as well, and the positioning and style of the date numerals is an important reference point for variety collectors who specialize in this series. Now here is where the financial story of the 1932 halfpenny becomes genuinely extraordinary. In heavily circulated condition, the kind of coin that has been through decades of commerce, that shows significant wear on the high points of the design, that carries the accumulated grime and patina of its long life, the 1932 halfpenny is already trading at prices between $300 and $500 in the current Australian collector market. That is for a coin in poor to fine condition. That is for a coin that most people would genuinely hesitate to pick up off the pavement. And it is already worth $300 to $500. Let that sink in for a moment, because it establishes the absolute floor of the value conversation, and even that floor is already extraordinary. In very fine condition, showing clear design detail across the portrait and the reverse wreath, moderate wear on the high points only. With the major design elements still sharp and confidently defined, the 1932 halfpenny commands between $1,200 and $2,500. We have crossed into four figures for a coin that is still showing honest wear from its life in circulation. In extremely fine condition where the wear is minimal, confined to the very highest relief points of the design. And the overall impression is one of exceptional preservation prices move convincingly to between $3,000 and $6,000. In uncirculated condition coins that never entered general circulation, that retain their original red or red-brown copper color, that show the razor-sharp detail of a freshly struck specimen, the 1932 halfpenny becomes one of the most avidly sought and competitively bid coins in the entire Australian pre-decimal series. Mint state examples graded at MS63 and MS64 by professional third-party grading services have achieved prices between $8,000 and $15,000 at specialist Australian numismatic auctions. At MS65, the gem uncirculated grade, representing exceptional quality with only minor imperfections visible under magnification, the price discussion begins at $15,000 and extends to $25,000 for specimens with extraordinary original color and surface quality. At the absolute pinnacle of the grade scale, MS66 and MS67. Grades occupied by only a tiny handful of confirmed specimens, the 1932 halfpenny enters a rarefied pricing conversation that begins at $30,000 and has no clearly defined ceiling. These are coins that are bought and sold among the most serious and financially committed Australian numismatic collectors in the country. When one comes to market, it is a genuine event in the specialist community, and the bidding reflects that status completely. The error and variety landscape for the 1932 halfpenny adds yet another extraordinary dimension of value potential. The production environment of the Depression-era mint, financially stressed, operating under budget pressure. Managing aging equipment with limited resources created conditions unusually productive of manufacturing anomalies. Die cracks on the 1932 halfpenny are known and documented, and significant die crack varieties command premiums of several $1,000s over the already impressive base values of standard examples. Repunched date varieties on the 1932 halfpenny are among the most eagerly sought in the entire Australian copper series. A confirmed and clearly visible repunched date where the date digits show evidence of having been punched into the die more than once is a variety that specialist collectors pursue with extraordinary dedication and extraordinary financial commitment. A gem quality example with a confirmed repunched date variety would be a discovery of landmark significance, and price discussions for such a piece begin at $20,000 and extend as far as collector passion and competitive bidding will carry them on auction day. Never attempt to clean a coin yourself, regardless of how dirty or corroded it appears. Professional conservation by a qualified numismatist is the only appropriate response to a potentially valuable piece. And the difference between a professionally conserved coin that reveals a dramatically higher grade beneath accumulated grime and an amateur cleaned coin that has permanently destroyed its collector value is the difference between a life-changing sum of money and genuine heartbreak. And if a Depression-era coin from 1932 has completely captured your attention, the next coin in this lineup is going to push that excitement to an entirely new level, because we are stepping back to 1921. deeper into Australian history, deeper into genuine rarity, and into values that will make everything you just heard seem like merely the beginning of the story. Next up, coin number 2, the 1921 Australian halfpenny. Stepping back from 1932 to 1921 means crossing 11 years in the calendar, but crossing a far greater distance in terms of rarity, historical weight, and collector market values. The 1921 Australian halfpenny sits in one of the most fascinating and financially rewarding positions in the entire pre-decimal Australian copper series. Occupying the post-World War I era, when Australia was rebuilding itself from the devastation of the Great War, and the mint was navigating profound economic and logistical challenges that left a permanent mark on the production characteristics of coins from this period. Those challenges, those disruptions, those transitional pressures of the immediate post-war era have created a coin whose scarcity in all grades, not just high grades, is dramatically more acute than the general public appreciates. And the collector values that flow from that scarcity are genuinely remarkable. When the soldiers came home from the Western Front and Gallipoli and all the other theaters of that catastrophic war, they returned to an Australia that was struggling to define itself in a changed and scarred world. The economy was volatile, the population was emotionally exhausted, and the social structures of pre-war Australia were shifting in ways that would eventually transform the nation. The mint was operating in this environment short of resources, managing the transition from war economy production priorities back to normal civilian coinage, and dealing with the kind of institutional disruption that major wars always leave behind. The 1921 halfpenny was produced in this context, and every aspect of that context contributes to its collector significance today. In the heavily circulated condition that describes most surviving examples turning up in old collections and estate clearances across Australia, the 1921 halfpenny commands between $400 and $700 in today's market. This premium for a heavily worn coin tells you everything you need to know about the strength and seriousness of the collector demand for this date. Even a battered, well-circulated example that has spent its entire life in active commerce is worth serious money to the right collector, simply because the combination of age and date-specific scarcity makes every surviving example genuinely precious. Moving up the condition scale, the values accelerate with a sharpness that reflects the growing scarcity of better-grade examples at each successive level. In very fine condition, where the design retains clear detail across all major elements and the wear is moderate and evenly distributed, the 1921 halfpenny is currently valued between $2,000 and $4,000. The jump from the circulated floor to the very fine level is already dramatic, reflecting how genuinely uncommon, well-preserved examples of this date truly are in the current market. In extremely fine condition, minimal wear, sharp design detail retained across virtually all elements. The surfaces showing the honest preservation of a coin that circulated lightly, if at all. The 1921 halfpenny enters price territory that would genuinely shock most people who do not follow the specialist Australian coin market. Current valuations for extremely fine examples range from $5,000 to $9,000, placing this coin firmly in the category of serious numismatic investment even before we reach uncirculated grades. Think about that for a moment. A coin from 1921 showing only light wear but still circulated is worth between $5,000 and $9,000 to the right collector today. In uncirculated condition, the 1921 halfpenny becomes one of the most aggressively pursued coins in the entire Australian pre-decimal copper series. The scarcity of genuine mint state examples from this date is acute. The production and distribution environment of post-war 1921 Australia was not conducive to the kind of careful set-aside and long-term preservation that creates populations of uncirculated coins for future collectors. Most of the 1921 halfpennies that exist in the world today are circulated. Most of them are well circulated. Genuinely uncirculated examples are rare in the most meaningful sense of that word, and the prices they achieve at auction reflect that reality with full force. MS63 and MS64 graded examples have sold at specialist Australian auctions for prices between $12,000 and $20,000. MS65 examples Gem uncirculated coins of exceptional quality have been the subject of price discussions beginning at $20,000 and reaching $30,000 for specimens with outstanding original surfaces and color. The error and variety market for the 1921 halfpenny is a specialized area of study that rewards dedicated collectors with discoveries of genuine significance and substantial financial value. The post-war production environment of the mint in 1921 created specific die preparation and striking conditions that have resulted in a range of documented and suspected varieties for this date. Collectors who specialize in early Australian copper know this date well and examine every example that comes to market with meticulous attention to detail specifically because the variety potential of the 1921 issue is so significant. A major confirmed variety, a significant die crack, a clearly visible repunched date, or a dramatic striking anomaly on a well-preserved example of the 1921 halfpenny would be a discovery that the specialist community would respond to with extraordinary financial enthusiasm. Price discussions for major confirmed varieties on this coin in very fine or better condition begin at $15,000 and have genuine potential to reach $25,000 to $35,000 depending on the nature and visual impact of the variety. The broader historical significance of the 1921 date also contributes to its collector appeal in ways that extend beyond pure numismatic analysis. This coin was circulating in Australia during one of the most dramatic and consequential decades in the nation's history, the post-war 20s. A period of social transformation, economic volatility, and profound cultural change. Holding a 1921 halfpenny is holding a physical artifact from that era. And that tangible historical connection is something that collectors value in ways that cannot be fully captured by grade reports and auction results. And if the post-war history of 1921 Australia has captured your imagination, the next coin takes us back even further into the story of this nation to a year that sits right in the middle of the Great War itself, to a time when Australia was pouring its young men and its national resources into a conflict that would define a generation. The values for that coin are going to take everything we have discussed so far and push it to a completely new level. Next up, coin number 3, the 1919 Australian halfpenny, the year 1919, sits at one of the most emotionally and historically charged moments in the entire story of modern Australia. The Great War had ended in November 1918. The armistice had finally silenced the guns of the Western Front after 4 years of carnage that had taken 60,000 Australian lives and left an entire generation permanently scarred by what they had witnessed and survived. The year 1919 was the year of return, the year of grief, the year of attempting to rebuild a normal life from the ruins of the most destructive conflict the world had ever seen. It was also, crucially for our purposes today, the year that produced a halfpenny whose survival in collectible condition is dramatically scarcer than even many specialist collectors fully appreciate, and whose values in the current market reflect that scarcity with prices that are genuinely breathtaking. The 1919 Australian halfpenny was produced in the shadow of war's end, in a mint environment that was transitioning from the production priorities of wartime back to normal civilian coinage operations. The economic disruption of the war years, the loss of skilled mint workers to military service, the material shortages and infrastructure challenges of the war economy, all of these factors influenced the production of Australian coinage in 1919 in ways that are still being fully understood and documented by specialist researchers. What is clearly understood is that the surviving population of 1919 halfpennies in genuinely collectible condition is remarkably thin, and that the demand from serious collectors for this specific date consistently outpaces available supply in every condition category. In heavily worn circulated condition, the grades that represent the bulk of surviving examples from this date, the 1919 halfpenny is commanding between $500 and $900 in the current Australian market. This is a premium that tells an important story about both the scarcity of this coin and the depth of collector demand for it at every condition level. A coin in poor condition from this date is worth serious money today, and that premium is growing consistently year after year. In fine to very fine condition grades that show honest circulation wear, but retain meaningful design detail across the major elements. The 1919 halfpenny is currently trading between $2,500 and $5,000. The relatively sharp jump from poor condition to fine/very fine values reflects the genuine rarity of well-preserved examples from this date. Every step up the condition ladder for the 1919 halfpenny represents a meaningful and significant narrowing of available supply, and the prices respond to that narrowing with corresponding sharpness. In extremely fine condition, the 1919 halfpenny becomes a genuinely serious numismatic acquisition. Current market discussions place extremely fine examples in the range of $7,000 to $12,000, a price range that positions this coin among the most valuable circulated pre-decimal copper pieces in the entire Australian series. Collectors who find themselves in possession of a 1919 halfpenny showing only light wear and strong design detail should understand clearly that they have something extraordinary on their hands. Uncirculated examples of the 1919 halfpenny are among the most avidly pursued rarities in Australian pre-decimal numismatics. The population of genuine mint-state examples from this date is so small that the appearance of one at auction is a significant event that attracts attention from the most serious collectors in the country. MS-63 and MS-64 graded examples have achieved prices between $18,000 and $30,000 at specialist Australian auctions. Numbers that reflect both the extreme rarity of uncirculated survivors from this date and the fierce competitive bidding that their appearance invariably generates. MS-65 and above, if such a coin were to be discovered and submitted for professional grading, would enter a pricing conversation that begins at $35,000 and would be limited only by the competitive energy and financial commitment of the collectors in the room on auction day. The variety and error potential of the 1919 halfpenny is a subject of ongoing specialist research, and discoveries continue to be made by collectors who examine this date with the detailed attention it deserves. The wartime and immediate post-war production environment of the mint created specific technical conditions that are known to have produced interesting die varieties, and the 1919 issue is no exception. A significant confirmed variety on a well-preserved example of this coin, properly attributed and documented by a recognized specialist, would be a discovery of major importance in Australian numismatics. And the financial reward for making such a discovery would be proportional to its significance in a market where the appetite for important 1919 halfpenny varieties is virtually unlimited. And as remarkable as 1919 is, the next coin in our lineup takes us back 2 more years to a date that sits right in the heart of the most devastating phase of the Great War, to a year when Australian soldiers were dying in the mud of Flanders and Gallipoli. And the mint was producing coins under wartime pressures that created one of the most genuinely scarce dates in the entire pre-decimal series. Next up, coin number 4, the 1917 Australian halfpenny. If you want to understand why the 1917 Australian halfpenny commands the kind of prices that make experienced collectors catch their breath when they discuss it, you need to understand what 1917 meant for Australia. It was the 3rd year of the Great War, arguably the most brutal and costly year of the entire conflict for Australian forces. The battles of Passchendaele, Polygon Wood, Menin Road Australian soldiers were dying by the thousands in the mud of Belgium while simultaneously bearing enormous burdens on other fronts. The war was consuming everything Australia had: men, materials, money, institutional attention, and national energy. Every aspect of Australian life in 1917 was shaped by the war, including the production of coins at the Royal Australian Mint. The wartime production environment of 1917 was unlike anything the mint had experienced before or would experience again in quite the same way. Material constraints, workforce challenges as skilled workers were drawn into military service, the diversion of national resources and institutional attention toward the war effort, all of these factors created a production environment that was under pressure in multiple directions simultaneously. The result, from a numismatic perspective, was a halfpenny whose production circumstances and survival characteristics create one of the most compelling and financially rewarding stories in the Australian pre-decimal copper series. In heavily worn condition, showing the significant wear of decades in circulation, Combined with the environmental damage that comes from long storage in unfavorable conditions, the 1917 halfpenny is currently trading between $600 and $1,000 in the Australian collector market. This floor price for a heavily worn coin is among the highest in the pre-decimal halfpenny series for non-key dates. And it reflects both the genuine scarcity of this coin in all conditions and the well-established collector recognition of its importance in the series. In fine to very fine condition, the escalation is dramatic. Current market valuations for fine to very fine examples of the 1917 halfpenny range from $3,000 to $6,000, a premium that speaks clearly to the depth and seriousness of collector demand for well-preserved examples of this wartime date. The historical resonance of 1917 as one of the darkest years of the Great War adds a dimension of emotional significance to this coin that collectors respond to strongly and that contributes meaningfully to its sustained market premium. In extremely fine condition, where the coin shows minimal wear and retains sharp, confident design detail across virtually all elements, the 1917 halfpenny commands between $9,000 and $16,000 in today's market. These are prices that reflect the genuine scarcity of high-grade survivors from a wartime production year, and they represent a level of financial commitment from buyers that is only made by collectors who understand exactly what they are acquiring and why it is worth every cent of the price they pay. Uncirculated examples of the 1917 halfpenny are among the most electrifying discoveries in Australian pre-decimal coin collecting. The survival of genuine mint-state examples from a wartime production year coins that somehow made it through more than a century without entering circulation is a phenomenon that reflects exceptional collector care and fortunate preservation circumstances. When such coins surface, the auction room response is extraordinary. MS-63 and MS-64 graded examples of the 1917 halfpenny have been the subject of price discussions and documented transactions between $20,000 and $35,000. At MS-65 and above, the conversation enters genuinely historic territory for the pre-decimal copper series, with price discussions beginning at $40,000 for truly exceptional specimens that represent the finest known examples of this extraordinary wartime date. The error and variety market for the 1917 halfpenny carries its own particular excitement and its own particular financial rewards. The challenging production environment of a wartime mint the pressures, the disruptions, the operational challenges of 1917 created conditions that were highly productive of die varieties and striking anomalies. Specialist researchers have documented a range of varieties for this date and continue to discover new ones as more examples are examined with modern techniques and specialist knowledge. A major confirmed variety on a gem-quality example of the 1917 halfpenny would be a landmark numismatic discovery, and the prices such a coin would achieve at specialist auction reflect the combination of extreme scarcity, wartime historical significance, and variety rarity in a way that creates one of the most powerful value narratives in the entire Australian coin series. If you thought the wartime pressures of 1917 created remarkable numismatic value, the final coin in today's lineup is going to completely redefine your understanding of what early Australian halfpennies are worth. Because we are going back one more year to 1916, to the very heart of the wartime era, and the values surrounding this coin are the most extraordinary we have discussed today. Next up, coin number 5, the 1916 Australian halfpenny. We have arrived at the coin that many specialist collectors of early Australian copper consider the single most compelling and financially significant date in the pre-decimal halfpenny series from the World War I era. And the discussion of its value is going to bring everything we have talked about today to a genuinely dramatic conclusion. The 1916 Australian halfpenny was produced at the absolute height of the Australian commitment to the Great War, the year of the Somme, the year when the full catastrophic cost of industrial warfare became impossible to deny or minimize. The year when Australia was pouring every available resource into a conflict that had already consumed more Australian lives than anyone had imagined possible. When it began, the production of Australian coinage in 1916 was taking place in a nation that was simultaneously trying to maintain civilian economic life and sustain one of the most ambitious military commitments in its history. The mint was operating under constraints that were both financial and logistical, managing the production of coins that the civilian economy needed while operating with reduced workforce capacity and limited material resources. The 1916 halfpenny emerged from this environment as a coin whose production characteristics reflect all of those pressures, and whose survival in collectible condition is genuinely and dramatically scarce. What makes the collector market for the 1916 halfpenny particularly fascinating is the combination of factors that converge to create a demand dynamic unlike almost any other coin in the pre-decimal series. The extreme age over a century of history carried by this small copper piece. The wartime production context that limited mintage and affected production quality in specific and documentable ways. The survival rate of high-grade examples that is among the lowest in the series. And the deep, passionate, financially committed collector base that pursues this date with a determination that pushes prices to levels that genuinely astonish newcomers to Australian pre-decimal numismatics. In the heavily worn circulated condition that describes most examples of this coin that survive in the world today, the 1916 halfpenny is trading at between $700 and $1,200 in the current Australian market. A coin in poor condition from over 100 years ago, still worth over $1,000 to the right collector today. This is the foundation of the value story, and even that foundation is extraordinary. In fine to very fine condition grades that represent meaningful preservation of design detail across the major elements of the coin, the 1916 halfpenny commands between $4,000 and $8,000 in today's market. The scarcity of well-preserved examples from this date is severe enough that even moderately circulated coins in fine condition represent genuinely uncommon finds. And the collector market prices them accordingly with a premium that reflects both their scarcity and their historical significance. In extremely fine condition, where the design detail is strong, the wear is minimal and honest, and the coin presents as a well-preserved survivor from the wartime era, the 1916 halfpenny commands between $14,000 and $22,000. These are prices that put this coin in the company of some of the most significant pieces in Australian pre-decimal numismatics. And they reflect the genuine rarity of extremely fine survivors from a year when the pressures of wartime production and over a century of subsequent wear have reduced the surviving population of high-grade examples to a critically small number. Uncirculated examples of the 1916 halfpenny are among the rarest and most valuable pieces in the entire Australian pre-decimal copper series. The notion of a 1916 halfpenny that somehow survived over a century without entering circulation that was preserved in mint state condition through 2 world wars, the Depression, and more than 100 years of history is a numismatic phenomenon of the highest order. When a genuine mint state example surfaces and is submitted for professional grading, the result is an event that the specialist Australian numismatic community responds to with the kind of excitement that is usually reserved for the discovery of genuinely major rarities. MS63 and MS64 graded examples of this coin have been discussed at prices between $30,000 and $50,000 among specialist collectors. MS65, if such a coin were ever to be confirmed, would begin a price conversation at $55,000 with no ceiling that could be confidently stated in advance of the auction. The variety and error market for the 1916 halfpenny is the most exciting and financially rewarding of any date in this entire video. The wartime production pressures of 1916 at the Royal Australian Mint created conditions that generated a range of die varieties and striking anomalies whose full extent is still being researched and documented by specialist collectors today. Every new example of the 1916 halfpenny that surfaces is examined with extraordinary attention by variety specialists who know that significant discoveries are still waiting to be made in this series. A major confirmed variety, a dramatic die crack, a clearly visible and attributable repunch date, or a confirmed overdated variety on a well-preserved example of the 1916 halfpenny would be a discovery of national numismatic significance. The price discussions for such a coin among the most serious Australian collectors begin at $40,000 and rise from there according to the quality of the host coin, the visual impact of the variety, and the competitive energy that the discovery generates in the specialist market. Every one of these coins, the 1916, the 1917, the 1919, the 1921, and the 1932 tells a story of Australian history that is carried in copper and preserved across more than a century. They are not glamorous coins. They are not bright or shiny or immediately impressive to the casual observer. But to the people who understand them, to the specialist collectors and numismatic investors who have taken the time to learn what these small, dark coins represent, they are among the most important, most historically significant, and most financially rewarding pieces in the entire Australian collecting landscape. So there you have it, 5 early Australian halfpennies that carry the weight of this nation's most dramatic historical chapters on their surfaces and values in today's collector market that most Australians would find genuinely difficult to believe. From the Depression-era gravity of the 1932 coin to the post-war significance of 1921. From the raw historical weight of 1919 to the wartime intensity of 1917, and finally to the extraordinary rarity and value of the 1916, these coins represent a chapter of Australian numismatic history that is more financially significant and more deeply rewarding to collect than most people will ever fully appreciate until they watch a video exactly like this. 1. Here is what I want you to do right now. Go through every old tin, every coin jar, every estate collection, every drawer full of old coins that exists in your home or in your family's possession. Look specifically for small copper coins from the early 20th century. Look for the ones that are dark, dirty, and heavy, the ones that look like they have been through a century of Australian history. Because they have. Do not clean them. Do not test them. Do not handle them more than necessary. Take them to a professional numismatist or a specialist Australian coin dealer and have them assessed. Because what looks like a dirty old penny might be sitting on top of a value that will genuinely change your perspective on what ordinary objects can be worth. If this video opened your eyes to something you did not know before, and I genuinely hope it did, please hit the subscribe button right now. We produce this kind of deep, specialist, financially significant content about Australian coins regularly, and every video we make has the potential to put real money in the pockets of Australians who discover that what they already own is worth far more than they ever imagined. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment below telling us what old coins you have found in your collection, and we will see you in the next one. Do not miss it. Thanks for watching, and happy collecting.